Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark show for October 11, 2024. We're going to be doing our Thursday thoughts for the Week 6 NFL picks. Before we intro our co-host for tonight, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see here in the merch store, I have a ton of t-shirts, and as I noted yesterday, we have a 20% off sale right now. As we get rid of this pop-up right here, a 20% sale. One shirt for $16. Several of them for $17. Of course, I'm wearing one, and keen observers might see that it's the same shirt as yesterday. Yes, I'm in dad mode, which means I wear the same clothes 2 or 3 days in a row. But these shirts last a long time. I've had these shirts for several years, no wear and tear, as Cassandra in the chat has pointed out. So these are high quality shirts for $16 to $19 in this economy. I think that's a pretty good deal. So that would help support the show. Also, please consider super chats and super stickers because YouTube ads pay nothing. John Sanders gave us a great super chat yesterday. John Slew, you guys have been so awesome with your contributions. Also in the past, Andrew Z, Ken Meek and Eagle, Degeneron, Kevin Kovac, Germ, Stuart Griffin, you guys have been so awesome. So any further contributions would really help us out a lot and keep the show going. Also on Amazon, we have my books. I've written 3 books. The latest one is Jerks of the College Years, where I made fun of people. As Mike in the chat pointed out yesterday, he liked the book. So we've had some good feedback from this book. So I made fun of people at Penn State. I went there for 6 years. So as you can see on the cover, very, very weird people, including this one guy in the bottom left who stole my trash can in my dorm room. So you can read all about that. Also, how the 2020 MVP was stolen. Brett Favre tried to sabotage Aaron Rodgers. Most people don't know that. So you can read that book as well. So any of that helps out the show. I am joined once again on Thursday by Andy Isco. Andy, how are you? And how was your week 5?
I'm still trying to figure out the t-shirt. Sounds like a real great deal if you handle clothing the way you do. That works out to about $2 a day.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, $6 a day if you're wearing a shirt 3 days in a row.
Yeah, that's
now, of course it doesn't consider the depreciation impact of all that, but a good deal.
Right. It's a great deal. I say this all the time, so thanks for ruining that. How's your week 5 and or tonight? I don't know if you had the game.
I did not have the game tonight. I was busy watching, as I told you before, the baseball, the playoffs. I was following the football game, but the way the 49ers have been playing, it's always uncomfortable laying 3.5 in a game. And the way the 49ers were playing, I wanted to see a good effort out of them. I think from at least following along and reviewing the play-by-play, I'll be watching the game a little bit later on replay. It seems as though they played one of their better games of the year, even though, as you pointed out, they did lose their a replacement starting running back in the second quarter there. So it might have been even a little bit more. And Seattle, of course, coming in off of a loss that arguably they could have won or certainly sent into overtime, but for that field goal block that was returned for a touchdown, although they struggled more than I expected against the Giants anyway. So it was really a case of two teams playing that right now I wouldn't feel comfortable backing either of them. So I should just sort of pass on that one and see what I can learn when I watch the game later.
Yeah, it was, spoiler alert, I guess it was 23-3. The Niners lost, as you said, Jordan Mason, who that injury ruined our same game prop parlay because we hit the other 3 legs, which was Deebo Samuel over receiving yards, which hit like right away. We had George Kittle over receiving yards, and we had Kenneth Walker over receiving yards. We also had Jordan Mason over rushing yards. He was 7 yards short, and he got hurt in the middle of the game, which was pretty painful, unfortunately.
As to your question about last week, it was a pretty good week for week 5. I sort of put it out of my memory already, but I know that. We'll talk about one of the teams that I really liked last week, and if you got him at the right time, you got a win. If you got him at the wrong time, you got a loss. And if you played it at a number that prevailed for a good part of the week with both other numbers available, you got to push. So we'll talk about that, and that'll affect some games this week that I have an eye on.
Sounds good. Yeah, G Chuck saying Mason would have gone for 150 plus. That's actually what Andy said before we started recording. I think he would have had a monster game. So it's a shame for him. It's a shame for anyone who had him for the props. But we hit our main prop with Deebo Samuel, so it still feels good. And I had the Niners 3.5 minus 3.5 tonight. All right, let's get to the games. The first one on the slate is Jaguars not at the Bears, but it's in London, so just versus the Bears. A couple of injury notes here. Jaquan Brisker, who's the Bears' talented safety, he's been DNP twice this week, so watch out for that designation on Friday. If he can't go, Chicago's pass defense is going to be a little bit worse. And then Tevin Jenkins, talented guard for the Bears, was downgraded in practice today to DNP. So Chicago might be a little shorthanded here against the Jaguars. I had Evan on Tuesday, and I told him I was kind of wishy-washy on this game, didn't really know where to go with it, and he talked me into the Jaguars. So I switched sides. I initially had the Bears for no units. Now I had the Jaguars for no units, but I'm not really seeing a big edge here. So do you like this game at all?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like the Bears in this spot.
Okay.
Jacksonville was the team I was referring to. They had a 10-point lead, and once again, their defense let them down. And just like the week before, when they couldn't hold on against Houston, they ended up losing a game that they seemingly were going to win. They were fortunate that there was enough time to score the late field goal, but that's been a problem with Jacksonville all year. I do not like their defense at all. The offense, I'm still unsure about. I do like the Bears defense overall, although obviously the injuries will affect that. But the other thing I like is that we're starting to see Caleb Williams becoming much more comfortable in the Bears offense. And I think the Bears as a whole offensively are starting to play a little bit better. You go back to that opening game and they couldn't even score a touchdown in that win that they got. What was it, against Tennessee, I believe? And they've shown strides. The quarterback Williams has now hit 300 yards over the last two of his last 3 games. I believe it was the second straight week he didn't have an interception. So I like the way that the Bears are playing, and this is a team that I thought would show improvement over the start of the season. Now, if you go back, I was one who did not like the trade of Fields, because I thought Fields was a better fit in Chicago, largely due to the experience that he had, although they were changing offensive coordinators, but they had invested on him, and now they basically went with another Trubisky, hold on to him for 2-3 years and give up on him and go to the next latest quarterback. And Williams might live up to that potential, and Fields certainly has found a nice place over in Pittsburgh, where he's been a very capable leader on that team. So I do like the Bears in this spot, certainly under a field goal. Is a price that's reasonable. I don't know that there's really any edge to the fact that Jacksonville has played there before. I just think fundamentally Jacksonville is doing more things wrong, and the Bears are doing more things right as the season has unfolded. And, we're basically at this point, game-wise, we're basically at the 1/3 point. 5 out of 17, so one more game. This week will mark the 1/3 mark, 6 out of the 18 games that will have been played.
Yeah. So maybe you'll convince me to go back to the Bears. Evan was talking about how Jacksonville's history in London, like they know how to play well there. Whereas you just don't know how the Bears will play. We had it was a couple years ago. You had the Packers just have a meltdown against the Giants, and after the game, we kind of learned that Matt LaFleur was so frustrated with the time change that he missed the meeting, and he was just ranting about it to the media. So I guess there's just
that's on him.
With the Bears. Right. I just think you never know how travel is going to affect these teams that haven't done it before. So I guess that's what kind of sold me to switch to Jacksonville. But like I said, I'm not going to bet this game. But yeah, you definitely sound like you have a much stronger opinion on this one than I do.
I just like the direction of the two teams. And I also don't like, again, the Jacksonville defense and the fact that it's almost like Baltimore, where they have difficult. Now, that wasn't the case last week. It was actually they were actually on the other side of a team that couldn't hold a lead. But Jacksonville has had difficulty closing out games. This is a team that lost a lot of close games. And they could have 2 or 3 more wins than they actually have because they've been unable to close things out. And I still don't see Lawrence is playing a little bit better, but I still see some flaws that I'm not comfortable with about him.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with him either. Although I do like that they suddenly have a running game with Tank Bigsby. Yeah. He looks pretty great.
They do have a better running game than the Bears right now statistically.
Yeah, it's true. Josh says Brisker did not travel, so yeah, it's good to know. Thanks, Josh. And he said Chicago's been in London since Tuesday. Jacksonville arrives tomorrow. That would normally sway me to the Bears, but I feel like the Jaguars know what they're doing here. They've done it before.
Yeah, but other than the time difference, the only advantage Jacksonville will have had is that they've played on the field before. Otherwise, it's football.
Yeah, sure.
And again, the fact that that Chicago got there a few days earlier is not necessarily an advantage per se, but it's more of a disadvantage to Jacksonville. Even though I do see there's a question there about Jacksonville having an advantage because they were able to get acclimated, and maybe they felt that because they have been acclimated, they didn't need to get there as early as they can. But keep in mind also, getting there early also allows the family of the players who are there to, do a little bit of things while the players are practicing and all that. And that's a little intangible positive, I think, for the familial aspect of the trip.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder why Jacksonville changed the strategy. You could be right. Maybe they just figure that, or maybe they're taking it for granted. But yeah, either way, like I said, you definitely have a much stronger take on this game than I do. Let's get to the next one. We have Washington, Baltimore. The update I have here is so we had Marlon Humphrey and Ronnie Stanley were both not practicing on Wednesday, which kind of like drew a slight red flag. I don't really care about the first day in practice. Just because the Thursday
it's an extra
Friday,
day of rest. Yeah,
right. Thursday and Friday are just so much more important, and your veterans resting on Wednesday usually, but still, it's something to watch out for. Both return to practice on a limited basis on Thursday, so I don't think you need to worry much about that. I'm still leaning toward Washington here. I just wonder if this defense has been so great the past 2 weeks, like after being terrible the first 3 weeks. I wonder if that's going to catch up with them. I don't know. I said this last week, but like at some point, I don't know if it's going to happen. But if Washington's carriage turns into a pumpkin, it wouldn't shock me at all if they get blown out. But I think this line is just so high, and I really don't like the Ravens that much either. As far as they have some weaknesses that can be exploited here. Like their secondary has a lot of issues. They have 3 new offensive linemen this year, and the offensive line hasn't been that great in pass protection. So these are areas Washington can exploit in this game. So I'm leaning toward the underdog, but I just don't know how to evaluate Washington. Do you have a strong opinion here?
Well, a little bit more. You go back and you trace Washington, first year quarterback, first year with them head coach, who's a defensive head coach, and Dan Quinn. So you wouldn't be all that surprised. You would hope, as we've seen, that there would be some defensive improvements made as the season unfolds, and Quinn has an opportunity, along with defensive coordinator, to evaluate what kind of progress is being made, where there are weaknesses, where there are strengths, etc. In fact, the one bad game that Washington played this year defensively was the opening game at Tampa Bay, when Quinn didn't really know what he had other than what he saw in practice and those meaningless preseason games. Baltimore, they've always been a good defensive team. This is not one of their better defensive games, but the concern I have is that normally in the past, Baltimore's been pretty decent against both the pass and the run. That's not the case this year. Now, it's not the best metric to use, but it's still somewhat of an indicator. They are number 1 against the run, allowing 60 yards per game. They're number 31 against the pass, allowing 260 yards per game. I think that's the number that I recall seeing when I ran it this morning. So teams have had success moving the ball. We've pointed out about, I think we talked about it last week. I mentioned about the fact that, the defense collapsed against the Raiders with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. That allowed the Raiders to come. I think it was a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, or maybe not quite that, but they came back to win the game. And then they had that, 28-6 lead against Dallas the following week after they had lost that game to the Raiders. And a lot of us were on Baltimore, but it should not have come down to a 28-25 final after the way that they had controlled that game for the first 3 quarters. So that's a recurring theme. And then last week, not surprisingly, Cincinnati, that does have a potent offense, and is finally looking healthy pretty much all the way around, was able to put some numbers up on Baltimore. The way Daniels is progressing, the way the entire offense is playing, the way that the play calling is continuing to improve. I don't want to go against a team that is playing as well as the Commanders are right now. Now, remember, they had those 2 big wins on the road. And then last week was, the first game in front of the home fans, and they certainly didn't disappoint. One of the things I do throughout the season is I use power ratings, and I really carry them over from one year to the next, maybe making minor modifications if if an elite quarterback retires or something, or is moved or something. I had the Ravens about 20-point favorites if this game were played in week 1. okay, at Baltimore, and with good reason. They were the defending AFC number one seed. They, lost that game in the playoffs. Washington, look, their season win total is 6.5, and they're already 2/3 of the way there, or a little bit under that, basically 4 out of 6.5. So they're basically over improving, and they're showing solid play each week. I don't want to go against the strong team. The one concession I will make is that I do expect Baltimore to win. But again, Washington has shown backdoor cover ability with their passing game, and Baltimore has shown a permissive backdoor cover ability to opponents.
Yeah, I could absolutely see a backdoor cover here for sure. So pointing out, Andy and the Chiefs rolled late last year, and they got there late. I believe that was that was the Germany game against the Dolphins. But yeah, they definitely did. So maybe it doesn't matter. And Chris asking, hey, Walt, there's someone who lives in the area. What is the Washington-Baltimore rivalry like? Is there one? Their stadiums are only 30 minutes apart. Well, I'm right outside of Philly, so it's like not that close. But as
Philly, Washington is a bigger rivalry than Baltimore, Washington. And I think largely because they're in different conferences.
I think that the fans don't like each other, but as far as the teams, I don't really think they care about each other. They play once every 4 years. So it's not a big deal. But
and by the way, I'll just interrupt for a moment and say I think that's true of a lot of rivalries, that the players really don't want to care unless they're asked about it. It's the fans who really make a big deal out of the rivalries too. To Philadelphia players, there's an importance to playing a game against the Commanders, Giants, and Cowboys because they're all in the same division, so the games are a little bit more important. But I don't think it raises to the intensity as far as the rivalry goes as you see amongst the fans.
I feel like there were bigger player rivalries the decades ago.
Probably when you never got traded and everybody stayed with the same team for 12 or 15 years.
It's a good point. Yeah, it always felt like this when the Sixers and Knicks played each other, like it felt like they actually hated each other. But now these players all know each other. They're all friends. They
all have the same agents. Many of them.
Yeah. So it feels like the players don't really hate each other, but the fans do. I went to Penn State. Philly and Pittsburgh are 5 hours apart, but Eagles and Steelers fans would fight. Like they would actually be fist fights, just based on the team they rooted for. So the fans care about this way more.
And another thing to your point about the players, notice how many players are invited to and accept playing in other players' charity golf tournaments.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. Love Teat says Redskins are going to blow out the Ravens. Bet of the week. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, well, if you like that, just bet the money line, or even better, bet the Washington
alternate spread. Yeah.
Yeah. Washington -2.5, or even minus 5.5. You can maybe get that. Putting a touchdown on the House of Monty touchdown line spread. Okay. Yeah. We'll get to that in a bit. Our next game is Cardinals at the Packers. So I like most of the later games. This is another one where I don't have a strong opinion. The Cardinals might get Darius Robinson back. He started the year on IR, but he was limited Wednesday. Then he was DNP Thursday. It's really the only update I have here. I kind of wonder if Jordan Love is going to be healthier this week, because I think this was his original timeline to return. When he got hurt, they said maybe week 6. And he returned early for a couple weeks, and he just hasn't been himself. But I wonder if this is going to be the game where he kind of shows up after having 2 mediocre performances. And it's a great opponent to do it against because Arizona's defense is so bad. So I'm leaning toward the Packers -5. I like that. I like being able to fade Arizona off a win, just a big win as a big underdog against a divisional rival. So I don't know how focused they're going to be. Kyler Murray signing a contract with Call of Duty. So I don't know how focused he is in this game. So like I said, I'm leaning toward Green Bay. Do you have a strong take in this game?
I don't know if it's a strong take, as perhaps you feel. I also agree with Green Bay. One of the things I mentioned is I carry my power ratings over, and I do 3 comparison each week. What was the line at the start of the season, if that was week 1 game? What is the line now as it's adjusted based upon the play of the teams relative to where they started the season? And then I start everybody off with an equal power rating in week 1 and make my normal adjustments based upon what happens this season. And a lot of those adjustments are going to be based upon So like the Panthers started off at 100. The Chiefs started off at 100. The power ratings aren't very meaningful for the first few weeks because they can't compensate for teams that are showing much improvement or much decline. But after about 4 or 5 weeks, you start to get a little bit of a sense. So I started off both the Cardinals and the Packers even. And based upon their performance for the first 5 weeks of the season, where they played and whom they played, I actually have Green Bay a 7-point favorite in this game, which is a little bit more than the points. But I wasn't surprised that they were favored by more, that my numbers would have more than a field goal. But I was surprised that it was a touchdown rather than maybe a field goal and a half or so. So then my numbers support the Packers in this game, but it's not a strong opinion. But if I were going to play the Cardinals, I would have needed to probably get a touchdown.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not in love with this line, so this is gonna be a game I pass on unless there are some wacky injuries that we don't know of come Friday. We have a prediction here, 27-17. Empathize says Baltimore is a dump. I'd rather be in Florida with Milton than Baltimore. Update, by the way, on Kenny and Charlie. Both are safe. So glad to hear that. Tom, by the way, I feel so bad about this. I didn't mention Tom. Tom also lives in Florida. Yeah, so I didn't mention that yesterday. He's okay as well. I was talking to all three today. So glad to hear that they're safe. Unfortunately, Charlie had some house damages, so hopefully it's not too bad. But like I said, glad to hear everyone's okay after Milton. All right, next game is we get to Texans and Patriots. And so this is finally a game I like. I like the Patriots here. I think that the Texans coming off a big win against Buffalo in the last second just could be a bit distracted. They could be looking ahead next week. They have a bigger game next week against the Packers. So this could be a letdown spot. I also like when teams make changes at coach or quarterback. Just feels like all the players are kind of geared up because they don't want, because if the Patriots lose again, suddenly they're going to point the fingers at them. So they want to kind of make sure that it's like, hey, it was that guy, not me. And plus Drake May's mobility, I think could help out a lot. The one downside for the Patriots is that Ramondre Stevenson was DNP in practice both Wednesday and Thursday. I don't think it's a huge deal. Antonio Gibson, I think, is a good backup. So that doesn't really downgrade the Patriots for me. As far as the Texans, Laramie Tunsil returned to practice after missing Wednesday's practice. He practiced fully. Joe Mixon also returned to practice, but he was limited, so I'm not sure if he's going to return yet. But yeah, I like the Patriots. I'm not.
I believe Nico is out also for the Texans this week.
Yeah, Nico Collins put on IR. Yeah, exactly. So I'm on the Patriots. This is not one of my bigger bets of the week, but I think it might make the card. What do you think about this game?
I don't really have a position on the side in this game. I do prefer the under in this game because I still think the Patriots will have difficulty scoring points. Now, unfortunately, their defensive numbers have declined over the weeks after some of their, especially that opening game against Cincinnati, where they held what was expected to be a powerful offense and is starting to show like they are. I mean, putting up over 30 points in back-to-back weeks. As they did against Baltimore and the week before Washington on that Monday night game. The Patriots have been able to run the ball. They're averaging right about 5 yards per carry, which is almost slightly more than what the Texans are allowing. But that means that the Patriots have a good reason to also protect Drake May, the quarterback, not force him to do too much so they can try to run the football, which would tend to shorten the game, fewer possessions, longer possessions because of the clock not stopping. Texans are about average in running the ball. Patriots, not quite that same, but still not well below average. Patriots, however, their offense is just so bad. They're 31st in the league. They average 4.3 yards per offensive play, which is right near the, obviously right near the bottom at number 31. Houston, a little bit more in the middle of the pack. And overall, Houston, their defense, 4.8 yards per play, has them number 4. So fundamentally says Houston should win this game, but I don't want to lay 7 points because I think that the Patriots might. I don't want to lay the points with Houston because they might going up against a rookie quarterback and wondering, what kind of pressure is on Drake May. Oh my, this is my big chance to maybe become the starter for the full season. And what will Houston do against a rookie quarterback? As far as that goes. And again, remember, DeMeco Ryans a defensive coach from his days in San Francisco. So that makes me prefer the under in this game, and I think barring any turnovers that set up good field position or easy scores for the other team, or scores off the turnover or the block, kicks, punt, whatever, I think this game stays under. I think that's a nice number at 38 right now.
Yeah, I think you're right on track there with the under. Sue asking, is Baltimore more of a dump than Oakland? I have never been to Oakland, so I can't compare. But I've been to
But
Baltimore.
you have been to Baltimore.
I've been to Baltimore several times. Most recently, a couple years ago, for my wife's friend's wedding. And as we were driving home, we saw some people like shooting up with needles on the sidewalk. And then we turned the corner, and there was Baltimore Stadium, the Ravens Stadium. I was like, wow, it's like not a very good neighborhood there. So yeah, I don't know. I would say Oakland. I haven't been there, so I don't know. Just by default.
I haven't been there either, Walt, but I have been to Baltimore when it really was a dump. I'm a lot older than you are, so I remember back in the 1980s when Baltimore had not yet put in the Inner Harbor with the aquarium and the new stadiums for baseball and the new stadium for football, etc. Because that was actually, I think it may have been even before Baltimore got the new franchise after or when Cleveland moved, which I think was a little bit later than that. So what I remember about Baltimore is it's a lot better than it used to be. I, too, have never been to Oakland, but the stories from I tell about certainly about the stadium in Oakland, that that's why we're getting the Oakland A's out here in Vegas in a few years.
Yeah, and anyone who's watched The Wire, you could almost feel like you've been to Baltimore as well. All right, let's get to the next one. The Buccaneers at the Saints. This line completely flipped as to what it was before on the advanced spread, because the Saints are -2.5 now. The Buccaneers are -3.5 because of the quarterback change. So this is a rough spot for the Saints, just because they played on Monday night and they have a Thursday game coming up. So just really they have to be exhausted here. So that would normally benefit the visitor here. I just think that we're getting a bad number at -3.5. With if I'm betting -3.5, it has to be a good team. And Tampa is, I think, mediocre. Their defense is pretty bad. Their offense has been great, but I don't trust this defense at all, even against Spencer Rattler. I like backup quarterbacks against bad defenses or mediocre defenses, and that's the case here. So not really sure what to make of this, as far as you have the quarterback change versus fatigue, just based on schedule. Injury notes here. Graham Barton, the Buccaneers center, has been DNP in practice twice. Now, he's not that good of a player, but still, center is a very important position. So not having him would be just a bad situation for the Buccaneers. However, on the plus side, Antoine Winfield was limited in practice twice, so he might return. We'll see. He might be a week away, though. So I'm leaning toward the Saints right now at this number that we're getting good value at, but I just not a fan of this one. Do you like this game a lot?
Not a lot, but I would also tend to look towards the Saints plus the points and also under the total, because, again, I think with a rookie quarterback starting with Rattler, I think the Saints will try to be as conservative as they can, which, again, means short passing game, not ask him to do too much, get Kamara involved a lot. And again, when you run the ball a lot, you shorten the game, you lengthen the time of drives, because you're not stopping the clock again if you're using a short passing game, which is effectively like a running game as long as you keep it in bounds and you don't have Saquon Barkley towards the end of the game not catching a pass in the open. The clock will continue to run. By the way, I did not have Philadelphia in that game, so it's just an observation there. And as far as Tampa Bay goes, they're a decent team. I wonder, again, how much of a distraction the hurricane is for the players and their families that occurred, that they're on their mind. They have a list of things to do. They got to call insurance company, whatever the case may be, that could be a distraction. Now, of course, I think also these players are professionals. They're able to put that out of their minds when they're playing the game. But when you're sitting there on the practice field on Thursday and Friday, and there's a break in the action, maybe you're thinking about some of that stuff. I don't know. I've not been a player, but I have been a human being for a number of years. And I know that when there are stressful situations, you're not able to fully concentrate, especially when you're exhaling a little bit. So not sure I'm going to play the game, but I could probably make a better case for the under than I can for the Saints plus the points, because I do like the Saints. The thing I like for the under is I think the Saints have the better defense, and they also have the weaker quarterback.
Yeah, I think Under was the way to go here as well. Good point about the hurricane too, especially with Tampa getting hit the hardest out of all the major cities.
Yeah, the Tampa Rays are going to be playing daylight baseball next year.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So hopefully everyone survived.
By the way, let me just make this mention for the people who may also do some college football, because it was announced late today that the the Memphis at South Florida game, which was originally scheduled for Friday, was moved to Saturday. But rather than being played at Raymond James Stadium, where South Florida plays their games, they've moved it to Orlando. So if you have made a wager on that game, you want to check with the sports book you did, as you made it with, because very often they say as long as the game is played at the same venue within 24 hours of the original start time, you have action. Some books may say you have to rebet it, but a lot of books also say if the venue changes, your bet is canceled. So you may want to check if you have action on that game. If a situation comes up maybe once or twice a season.
Yeah, great update. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely make sure you contact your bookie or know the rules if you've done that. All right, so we move on to Browns at the Eagles. This line, I said this on Tuesday to Evan when I first saw the spread. I'm like, oh my God, how are the Eagles favored by 9 here? I don't believe it. And then I just think it was sticker shock, just based on
based on what you've seen out of their defense this year.
Yeah, not only that, but also the advanced spread was Eagles minus 6.5. So you have
that indicated the possibility of one of their receivers playing, and the possibility or maybe likelihood that the other receiver was not going to play. And now it looks as though they're both going to play.
Yeah, and also Lane Johnson. They were all three were full in practice both days. So barring a unexpected setback, they will all be on the field. As far as the Browns injuries, both Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills were limited both days. So I guess that's good news. Although Jack Conklin has been limited all week, multiple times this year, and has not played. So that may not mean anything. Ethan Posick, the center, was DNP twice. So this Browns offensive line against the Eagles defensive front just seems like a big mismatch in Philadelphia's favor. And I can't bet.
What about Myles Garrett? What's his situation?
Myles Garrett was DNP Wednesday and limited Thursday. I made note of this as well on the site, that he's had foot injuries, but they listed him.
Both feet, I believe.
Both feet, yes, but they listed him this week as an Achilles, which I thought was like, wow, okay, so he picked up something new, or was it always Achilles and they were talking about feet the whole time? I don't know. Because that's what happened with Christian McCaffrey. Like it was his ankle, and then it turned into an Achilles. Oh no, it was his calf.
Hamstring.
It turned into Achilles. Yeah. It turned into Achilles eventually with him. So I don't know. I think Garrett will probably play. You'll definitely want to check on that, but I don't think he's going to be 100%, and he hasn't been 100%.
And if he's got and with the receivers being back, and he's got to make sudden moves, sudden stops, and changing of a position, that could further aggravate the foot injury.
Yeah, I just think Deshaun Watson is a broken quarterback at this point. He's not looking downfield when there's any sort of pressure. He drops his eyes. His shoulder is so injured. He looks like he's shot putting the ball. His windup is so long, it results in fumbles. I can't bet the Browns unless they're playing against another bad team anymore until they bench Watson. Now, when they bench him and go to Winston, I will have interest. But as of this point, I am going to be on the Eagles. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's Eagles or pass on this one. Maybe we look a little bit over because Philadelphia's offense should be significantly improved, and it makes Barkley a much more important factor in the game, the running game and the short passing game or short reception game, because of the fact that the two wideouts are going to be there. And that also, when you add the ability of Hurts, we should be able to see a better offensive performance out of the Eagles, who had a pretty decent one the first week of the season when they were, largely intact. At the same time, their defense still has to show that they can make some improvement. Now, maybe they play a little bit more aggressive, knowing that the offense now is capable of bailing them out, but that might also lead to some opportunities for Cleveland. But if I were going to choose between laying 9.5, 10 points, whatever it turns out to be with the Eagles versus playing the game over the 42.5 or 43, I'd probably feel more comfortable with the Eagles part of it if I had to play either side or total.
Yeah, I think the Eagles could be a better team in the second half of the season because I think they have talent on defense and they have the coaching, but it feels like they need to gel, I suppose. So it could be the opposite of last year where started strong and then struggled at the end. I think they could do well at the end, but we'll see. Chris says, I've been saying Watson's done for a year now. It's like Tiger Woods. They take away his ideal sexual lifestyle and never be the same. I guess that's true. Yeah, he looks broken to me. I don't know. Maybe in a year or two, if he fixes his
Maybe it
shoulder,
was the security of that big contract.
that could
It
be
was very
that could
hard
be
to justify on almost any level.
that could be it too. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think he's necessarily done forever. Although if gun to my head, I think he would. I think I'd say he would be. But there is a chance
Well, let
he
me ask you
could.
this: who's more likely to be playing quarterback in the NFL in 3 years, Watson or Tua?
Ooh.
Assuming Tua does not retire.
Oh, that's a good question. I think, man, I think Tua. I guess I don't know.
If he gets cleared to return,
Yeah,
I would think that at that stage, let's say he misses the rest of this year, which is likely, and maybe he sits out a year, but that's just to take precautions. But he still wants to play, and he's medically cleared to play. I would think that 2 or 3 years from now, if Watson's still in the league, Tua will be a more desired quarterback.
yeah. I think as soon as the Browns cut Watson, like maybe he latches on to someone else, but I don't know if there's going to be any demand for him. Whereas, like you said, if Tua
especially
can play,
again because of the contract,
right.
Cleveland would have to eat part of the contract if they trade him. I would have to think.
Yeah, it's just a huge blight on their whole salary cap situation.
Yeah.
Just a very rough spot. And as Kevin Stefanski kind of hinted that it's not his decision to bench Watson because he was asked in a press conference after the game, some of the games against Washington, that I think like a reporter asked, is it your do you have to talk to anyone to bench him? And then he said he basically, to paraphrase, he said it's like a team decision to bench Watson. So I think it's above his pay grade. Yep,
that's the owner.
Yep.
And the fans, fans don't care how much. Yeah, they'll complain about paying the quarterback, but they don't care. They don't care how much you're paying the quarterback if he's not effective. Get the effective guy in there. Now, we don't know about Jameis Winston, but I would certainly say right now Jameis Winston's probably a better fit.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I mean, with Winston, you never know what you're going to get, but you do know what you're going to get with Watson, which is terrible play.
Or what you're not going to get with Watson.
Exactly, yeah. All right, so last of the early games, we have Colts at the Titans. There was some major line movement here. The Colts were -1, and then the Titans swung to -2.5. I think this might be for two reasons. One, Will Levis practiced fully. I don't know why Will Levis would command such a line move, but I guess this is just like hatred for Mason Rudolph, I suppose.
I think it's probably, I'm guessing it's going to be more related to the second reason, which will now be 3 out of 3 instead of 2 out of 2.
Yeah. So, well, my second reason was, the Colts receivers, Michael Pittman Jr. Going to be out for several weeks, and not only that, Josh Downs missed practice twice. So the two top Colts receivers might be out.
And you're still dealing with Taylor and Richardson. Although Richardson, Taylor, I don't consider a significant issue, only because Flacco is competent. He's not as dynamic as Richardson, but I think he's a better decision maker.
Yeah, Flacco for sure is a better. He's a safer quarterback. I completely agree. I think for this matchup, though, I think Richardson would be better because Tennessee has been allowing a lot of rushing yards to quarterbacks this year whenever they're playing a scrambling quarterback. And I think it has to do with their linebacking core, which is just dreadful. The rest of the defense is great, but their linebacking core is pretty bad. So I think Richardson could potentially have a great rushing game if he were to play here. So I personally don't care who the Colts quarterback is. What I do care about, like we hinted at, the receivers, both Pittman and Downs being out, and also Taylor, so the Colts are missing their top 3 playmakers. They do still have Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell. I think those guys are pretty good. Pierce can make some big plays. Mitchell gets a lot of separation, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him in a bigger role this week. So if they didn't have Mitchell, like if they didn't draft him in the second round this year, I think I'd be more on the Titans. However, I think that the injuries are being played up too much because I think the Colts have good depth at receiver. And also, Trey Sermon was not bad last week. It was a tough matchup, and he did okay. He's obviously no Jonathan Taylor, but he's an okay backup. So I think I'm leaning toward the Colts here, just given that I feel like the line movement is not warranted given the Colts depth at receiver. So who do you like here?
Well, Tennessee is they're coming off their bye, which allows them to address some of the concerns that you raised. Interestingly, when I look defensively at the rushing game, the Titans are actually allowing fewer yards on a yards per rush basis than Indianapolis. I think one's like 4.0 and 4.5. If I look at the passing game, Indianapolis, when I look at what they the yards that they allow nearly 12 yards per pass completion, but Tennessee's averaging only 9.1 yards per pass completion on offense. On the other hand, Indianapolis is averaging 13.5 yards when they complete a pass. On the other hand, Tennessee's only allowing 9.6 yards. So it's strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness in the passing game. I don't see that Indianapolis is better at running the ball. Tennessee is not as bad as a lot of people think in stopping the run. And I like the way Tennessee played before the bye in their game against Miami a few weeks ago. I like to be on Indianapolis, but I am concerned about those injuries. And, again, we have a rookie head coach in Tennessee. He's had an opportunity now to evaluate his team after 4 weeks and, maybe make some changes that Indianapolis might not be prepared for. So I'm not going to play the game, and laying under 3, it's just a lean. But I would prefer the Titans simply because, what would this line be if Pittman, Taylor, and Richardson were completely healthy? Indianapolis would be a
minus
2 to 3 point favorite.
Yeah, minus 2.5 or minus 3. Yeah.
So when you have 3 kind of injuries, and then you mentioned the other receiver, it's kind of like cluster injuries. Okay, maybe the injury to the receiver is worth a point. Maybe the injury to the running back is worth a point. Maybe the quarterback's a point and a half. When you put them all together, it may be worth more like 5 points because you're taking away. You're basically starting away your top offensive skill players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree if I didn't like the Colts' depth there. I really do like Adonai Mitchell. I think he could be a very good player. So we'll see how he does. And Pierce can always hit a big play, but they are diminished there. I really like Downs. So I guess there's still a chance he could play. He hasn't been ruled out like Pittman has. But Downs has been so explosive. All right, let's get to the late afternoon games. There are 4 of them. The Chargers at the Broncos. So good news, bad news for the Chargers. Joe Alt practiced fully, so he'll be back. Rashawn Slater.
That's the good news.
Yeah, Rashawn Slater limited twice, so he might be back. And then the bad news.
The bad news.
Joey Bosa DNP twice. It's very surprising that he hasn't been able to practice coming off.
And also Herbert.
Yeah, Justin Herbert. I didn't. Hold on.
I think he was limited in practice.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. That's the issue. You just don't know how healthy he is. Like these quarterback practice reports, he was limited twice. I just don't know what to make of that. I assume he's not 100%, but like, is he 80% or is he 40%? I really don't know. It's a big question mark. That's why it's so difficult to handicap this game. I think.
Well, by the way, before you continue, let's just note that the Chargers passing attack this year, yards per game, number 31, 136 yards per game from an above average quarterback. And that's by design by Harbaugh.
Yeah. They've run the ball so well. But they haven't really thrown at all. The Broncos, they can be thrown on over the middle of the field. They leave the middle of the field wide open. So maybe this is a game where they attack with Lad McConkey or the tight ends. So I am leaning toward the Chargers, especially if Bosa plays. If Bosa's out, I don't think I'll bet this game. But I thought if everyone came back, I would be on the Chargers. I just think they're a much better team than Denver. Denver has won 3 in a row, but it feels like they're sort of a paper tiger right now where a lot of their wins, 2 of their wins were against teams that were not focused. Like the Buccaneers are coming off a revenge game against the Lions. Then the Jets had to travel to London, so they were not focused for that. And then last week they got the Raiders, who had like 10 players out or something like that. So I think the Chargers are the play here. Just don't really know with their injuries. Like I said, this is a tough one to handicap. Were you able to handicap this one any better?
I do like the Chargers. Part of it is because of the running game, but I think even at this low total, I have to look under. You realize that the Chargers are number 29 in the league in total offense, Denver number 28. And then you look defensively, the Chargers are number 5 in total yards allowed, Denver number 3. So you've got a weakness versus strength and weakness versus strength when you look at the offense versus defense. And even when I break it down on a yards per play basis, the numbers aren't that much improved when I look at it. And I like to look at yards per play because I think that's a much more meaningful statistic than yards per game because it's based upon the number of plays that you run. Well, Chargers are number 23 in offense, a little bit under 5 yards per play, about 4.9. Denver number 28, 4.5 yards per play. And defensively, the numbers are very similar. They're both under 5 yards per play allowed. So actually 5.0, but decimal points below 5.0 for the Chargers, and that's number 20. That's number 6, and 4.4 for Denver. So that's number 2. So you're basically talking about two teams who have outstanding defenses, very limited offenses. Both teams are able to run the ball for 4 yards or more per rush, and defensively, Chargers allow slightly under 4 yards per rush. Denver allows slightly over 4 yards per rush. So I think any way you look at it, especially with the passing game not being strong for either team, and you've got Harbaugh designing. I guess you still consider. When do you stop considering a rookie? Maybe halfway into the season. So they're still start designing plays for Bo Nix, who has not really shown a lot of progress over the first 5 games that he's played. He's looked good at times. He's looked better, but he's also had some bad games. And I'm not really going to count that game against the Jets when they were playing in the rain and all that, and had some of the ugliest stats that you mentioned what he did in the first half last year as far as was it -7 yards, something like that passing, but none, and that was in a win. But nonetheless, I think I hate the word always or never, so I like to say I rarely play a total under a number of 37 or lower. But this might be a situation, especially if you can at least get a 36 in this game, because I see it being another drawn-out game where both defenses are going to dominate, which means that you would think they're not going to, when you have a low yards per play number, it generally means you don't allow a lot of big plays because it takes only one big play to inflate a 4.5 yards per play to a 5.3 yards per play. So when you, after, several hundred plays, over the course of let's see, 5 games, we probably average maybe 60 plays a game at a conservative number. So you're looking at, in the case, the Chargers have had a bye, but in the case of 5 games, you're looking at, over 300 plays. The absence of large plays is going to keep that number down low. So I think that's another reason why I'm likely to play if I can get that 36 under 36, and I do like the Chargers, but not as much as it's hard to say I like a total under 36 more than I like a side, but with two offenses that are struggling and they're playing two good defenses, it could be one drive that determines this game.
Yeah. So I looked up real fast. You said totals less than 37 since 1989. The over has hit 51.4% of the time. So,
which is not a lot considering such a low total.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so you were at a disadvantage taking the unders there.
I'd say now, by the way, if you're looking at that, I would take a look, if you want to, the number of below 37. Let's go back to, let's say, I'll say 2019 when scoring really started to pick up and increased yearly for like 3 or 4 years. So you probably didn't have that many totals, at least in the first couple of 19 and 20 was the COVID season. But I'd be interested to see what the numbers are. I would think that it might be under that 51% going over simply because scoring, well, I shouldn't say that. The last couple of years have been very strong under years for almost any number.
So, well, this is bizarre. So since 2019, for totals less than 37, the under is 62-20.
Oh, wow.
That is wild.
That's astonishing.
That is, yeah. That's
because we've had total points in games go up, I think, from like 41.2 to like 44. And I think either 2 or 3 years ago, I think the average total per game was like 45 or 46. And they went down fast a little bit the last couple of years.
Yeah, last year some totals were back what they were in the early 2000s. So that is wild. I had not known that. That's pretty crazy. So All right, Slew says, seems like Joey Bosa is a cripple. Can't count on that guy to play week to week. Well, maybe that just means he's going to be crowned king because he has the best story, as anyone who's watched Game of Thrones knows. That's how it goes. Sorry if I spoiled that for you, Andy. Anyway,
no, that's okay. I don't watch Game of Thrones. I
well,
didn't see Game of Thrones.
if you ever decide to watch the first 6 seasons and do not watch season 7 and 8, no matter what,
Okay.
they completely ruined the show. All right, Steelers at the
Is that
Raiders.
why there was no season 9?
Well, there was George R. R. Martin wanted 13 seasons, and then they booted him off the show for some reason. I don't know why.
Maybe it was season 7 and 8.
Well,
from what you're telling me.
No, they booted him off after season 5, I think. So he was not there to ruin it. But no, the two showrunners were hired to do a Star Wars film. And then I think they did such a bad job that they were fired from the Star Wars film. So they rushed to get it through, and then they weren't able to do the film. So it was karmic justice, I suppose. All right, so we have Steelers at Raiders here. I was really hoping for some good news for the Raiders injuries, just because I love the spot for them because, first of all, I think the Steelers are just a complete fraud. They were outgained by 200 yards against the Cowboys. They especially with James Daniels going down, their best offensive lineman, they haven't been able to block at all. George Pickens is getting benched because he's not trying hard. Justin Fields seems to have regressed a little bit. They can't run the ball. Their defense was gashed by Dallas. Except for TJ Watt, they're not getting any pressure on the quarterback. And plus the Raiders had a quarterback change, which I like. So all that pointed toward the Raiders. However, Max Crosby DNP twice. Once again, I thought maybe he'd be better this week, but apparently not. And then another big one is Jacoby Myers was DNP twice, which wouldn't be significant if Devontae Adams were to play, but he's not going to play because he's on the trade block. So the Raiders could be without both top receivers and Max Crosby
and Wilkins.
And Wilkins too.
I think he's out for the year.
Christian Wilkins.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, I had not seen that. I have to look it up. But anyway, so they still have Brock Bowers. They still have Trey Tucker. Christian Wilkins placed on IR. I didn't check IR yet. He checked on Friday. So he's out too. So thanks for the heads up there. It just sucks that the Raiders are kind of my Raiders are kind of a shell of themselves right now. And while I initially like the Raiders heading into this week, I can't really back them with all these injuries. So what do you make of this game?
Yeah, there's just so much going on and off the field. I'm not quite sure about the quarterback change. The Purdue kid versus Minshew, who gave them experience but wasn't being effective, and maybe that has a lot to do with the offensive line issues that they've had. They're continued, although they've done well the last couple of weeks running the football, but that's been a problem for them, really going back to the start of the season. And then you got the Devontae Adams situation, which has to be a locker room distraction as far as he's concerned. The Steelers uncharacteristically lost the game last week because their defense, allowed a 4.5-minute, 14-play drive in the fourth quarter that allowed Dallas to score the game-winning touchdown. And so that, I think, would be – I still think, as much as you don't like the Steelers, I still fundamentally like them in a matchup like this. They are in need of a win now after that quick start. And also, they do have 2 winnable games coming up next at home. Next, one I forget the sequence. I think it's the Jets and then the Giants, or maybe it's the other way around, and then they have a bye week before they go to Washington. So I think that this could be the start of a favorable situation. And this might be a game that, because it would be on the road against a conference rival, even though it's not a rival that's likely not to be in the playoff picture, but this could be a game that determines whether or not the Steelers are able to get into the playoffs, because it is a winnable game in what might normally be considered a bad situation.
They have the Jets. Steelers have the Jets next. So, we'll see.
Giants.
We'll see how they rebound. That defense was so disappointing. Despite TJ Watt being on the team, the Steelers are 19th in pressure rate, which is pretty alarming just based on how great TJ Watt has been.
And by the way, being outgained by as many yards as they were, they still only lost by 3 in the last half minute.
Yeah,
So
I know.
yeah,
I know
you're
that
you're
well.
outgained by two. You're outgained by 200 yards or whatever it was.
Yep.
You're usually losing by like 14 to 17 points.
Yeah, and I know that well because I had the Steelers in the Super Contest and the Circa, and for
Uh,
5 units.
I was there. I was there right with you in those contests.
Yeah, losing on the last play was pretty brutal. So, all right, let's move on. Falcons at the Panthers. Um, so, a lot of injuries here for the Panthers, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because this is another spot where I like them. Atlanta coming off the win on quote unquote national TV against a rival. I don't know how focused they're going to be against Carolina. They lost to
Well,
Carolina.
that's also a division rival, one that they should plan on beating.
Yeah,
If
they lost.
I would like going against them more if this were a non-divisional game against a competent opponent.
Yeah, although I do kind of wonder how seriously they're going to take Carolina. I don't know. It is a divisional opponent, but like, is it that much of a rival? I don't know. Atlanta lost to Carolina last year in their first meeting or second meeting. I don't know how focused they were for that game. And yeah, obviously Kirk Cousins is much better than Desmond Ridder. You obviously don't need to say that, but the Panthers also have a better offense this year, so they're a better team. However, Taylor Moton, the right tackle, DMP twice. Josie Jewell, DMP twice. Austin Corbett, DMP twice. He's going to be out. So they're down. They're potentially going to be down 3 key players, including 2 offensive linemen. However, I don't like cluster offensive line injuries are concerning. However, Atlanta's pass rush is in the bottom 10 of pressure rate. So I don't know how much of a factor that's going to be. Atlanta's defense is 25th in EPA. So despite Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons joining the team, the defense has not improved at all. In fact, it's been worse. And Carolina's offense has moved the ball very well since Andy Dalton took over, except for last week when they had Chicago and the Bears' 6th-ranked defense. I think this is a lot of points. The advanced spread was 3. It was shot up to 6 just for 1 week's worth of results. I think this is a good opportunity to take Carolina, despite the injuries. I'm not going to be as high on them as I normally would be given the injuries, but I still think they're the right side. So, who you like here?
Well, the one negative, or strong negative for Carolina, this is only their second road game of the year. They've played 4 of their games at home, and they were at Philadelphia on that Monday night game.
This is a home game for Carolina. This is a home game. Oh, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was yeah.
For Atlanta, you mean? For
Atlanta. Yeah, for Atlanta. Yeah, Atlanta's. This is only their second road game for Atlanta. Yeah, not Carolina. It's an it's an advantage, I guess, for Carolina, or disadvantage for Atlanta. How you want to look at it? They're only playing on the road for the second time. However, from a scheduling standpoint, it's an important game for Atlanta because their next games they host Seattle, which is a 500 team maybe when it comes down to it. Then they're at Tampa Bay. And then they host Dallas, then they're at New Orleans, and then they're at Denver, and then they finally get a bye. So they're playing all these games in a row against better opponents than they're facing this week. This is a winnable game. And the fact that they lost to them last year should have their attention. This is a much better roster for the Falcons this year than they had last year. And again, going back to what the preseason projections were, Atlanta was projected to win this division. Now, a lot of us were joking, they might win the division with a record of 8-9 or 7-10. But the fact is, Tampa Bay has played better than expected. New Orleans has played better than expected, but now we don't know what's going to happen. Carr will probably be out, 3 weeks to a month possibly, unless they put him on IR, and if they think they're going to be out longer. So I think this is a very winnable game. Now, that being said, do they have the capability of winning by a touchdown or more? And I think with what we've seen out of Kirk Cousins this year, the answer would be yes. I am concerned about the defense, but I'm not that comfortable with the Carolina offense to do repetitive damage, the kind of repetitive damage against Carolina because of their offense, and Carolina's defense is just so-so at best. I think they have a better opportunity to do repetitive damage against Carolina than Carolina's offense has to do repetitive damage against the Atlanta defense.
Yeah, I think this could be a backdoor situation.
Playing on turf, I think, favors the Falcons.
I think this could be a backdoor situation with Andy Dalton just being able to throw on this team. Sue asking, Panthers defense is dreadful. Won't Cousins have all day to throw? Yeah, this could be a shootout. I could see this being 30, 38, 34 or something like that, 30, 35, 32, and something like that. I think that the Panthers can't keep pace or even get a backdoor cover. I think this line's just way too high, especially with Atlanta potentially being unfocused, given that they just had a big win against Tampa on national TV or national streaming, whatever you want to call it.
Well, but they've had an extra 3 or 4 days to come down off that high. The coach probably said, "Enjoy the win on Thursday and Friday. When we're back at practice, we're thinking Carolina." And
Yep.
again, it's a division game, and considering the division certainly with Tampa Bay, and I don't know about New Orleans, it's going to be more competitive, I think, than maybe a lot of people thought, because the record to win the division might actually be 10-7. That they cannot take this game lightly. And again, the extra rest, I think, sort of limits it. Yeah, if they were playing Sunday and they had a day off and they had to get right to work, the fact that they had to win the way they did, and the fact that they had the extra few days, I think it wears off. It's kind of like in college football. I'll just use that as another example. 2 weeks ago, Kentucky won at home against Ole Miss, and now they get to play Vanderbilt, who's off the upset win against Alabama. Well, Kentucky had a bye week in there. They got to enjoy that upset win over Ole Miss for a week. Then they got to take an opportunity to get ready for their upcoming opponent, which maybe last Friday, if they were starting to think about it, took very lightly. But after Saturday's big upset, they're focused. So I think that sometimes we make a little bit too much of, although I do believe letdowns are more, let's call it, impactful than look-aheads. I think that sometimes you've got to take a consideration that if you do have that extra time off, the letdown is not a big of a factor simply because they're playing a certain opponent the next week. Because especially in these days when there's a lot more to the mental coaching of teams to say, okay, enjoy it, but now let's regain focus and all that.
No, yeah, definitely a great point for sure. All right, so the last of the late afternoon games, the Lions are at the Cowboys. I think this spread is a misprice. I think
it's ridiculous.
Okay, well, hopefully we're on the right side, the same side here, because I made this line Lions minus 5.5 or something like that.
Wow, we are not.
Oh, wow, you like Dallas? Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I'm saying that if this game were at Detroit, wouldn't you take Dallas plus 7.5, 8.5 points? If they're 3.5 on the road, they're more on a neutral and even more at home. I think they're begging you to take Dallas with this line.
They're begging you to take Dallas?
Yeah. No, they're saying you're getting a hook at home. And again, if you do the extrapolation, what would you make this line in Detroit, and would you feel comfortable laying that number with Detroit at home?
I probably minus 5.5 or 6. I don't think it'd be 7.5. I
think 5.5 maybe on a neutral field.
Okay,
based upon the 3.5. No, I don't agree with the 3.5. I think that's a little too high. I would think, you maybe make, if anything, if you want to make the game tempting, I would make Detroit a 2.5 point road favorite. Now you got to think, is it that easy to play Detroit, or they're making it too easy to play Detroit if they make it 2.5? Remember, both of these are, they're playoff teams from last year. Dallas has been a routine playoff team, even though they haven't had success. They're still one of the, top dozen teams in the league. Now, Detroit has a lot of potential, but, and Detroit has not played explosively the way they expected it. Look, they lose at home scoring 16 points against Tampa. They did not do much in the second half against Arizona in a game they won. They've gained a lot of yards, but they haven't converted those yards into points. Now, yeah, Dallas does have some injuries, but there's still some talent on that team. And, we're starting to see a little bit more out of the Dallas offense than perhaps we thought we would see.
I really don't like this Dallas team at all. I think I think they might be one of the 10 worst teams in the NFL. I have them in the metrics. They are the 8th worst team in the NFL, according to EPA. I think Detroit is the top 5 team. So I think
explain to me EPA and the fundamentals that go into it, because remember, the result of a formula is only as good as the components of the formula and how relevant they are to what takes place on the field.
Yeah, EPA stands for expected points over average, and
how do they compute that?
I'm not completely sure how they compute that, but I do trust the numbers, and they have they have it per offense and defense for running and passing.
Now, do they base it on per play, per drive?
Yes, per play. Yeah.
Okay.
Per play. So I don't exactly know what you want. So for let's just do offensively for passing, Dallas is going to be higher. I think they are. So they're 13th in passing. Rushing, I assume that they're going to be pretty low. Let's see, they are they're about the middle of the pack in rushing. I think their defense is much worse though. Their
Now,
defense
now
is
that's the
horrible.
EPA stat, correct?
Yes.
Is that the
So
EPA stat? Okay.
yeah. So defensively against the pass, they are. Actually, it says they're sixth, but rush defense they are one of the worst teams in the NFL. Yeah, they're near the bottom in rush defense. Um, anyway, so this I think that Dallas can't do anything well outside of throw to CeeDee Lamb. Like they can't pass protect. Their left tackle is a disaster, and he has to go against Aiden Hutchinson. Zach Martin has not practiced yet this week, so he could be out. They don't run the ball well. Dak Prescott, when things aren't perfect, he does that, especially against good teams. Like Dallas tends to beat bad teams or mediocre teams, but whenever they play a good team, they usually don't win. And Dak Prescott does not play well in those games unless it's like fourth quarter comeback in garbage time, like against Baltimore. Defensively, without Parsons and Lawrence, they can't rush the passer. They can't stop the run. They have injuries in the secondary, so they're not great against the pass. I don't think they're going to be great against the pass. Especially given that like their pass defense numbers look fine, but think about like their opponents that they played. Like week 1, they Deshaun Watson. Week 2, they had Derek Carr, who didn't need to throw that much because the lead was so big. Then week 3, they had Baltimore. Week 4, they had Baltimore, which didn't throw at all. Week 4, they had Daniel Jones. And then week 5, they had Justin Fields. So they haven't even like faced a good passing attack yet. So I think Detroit could really take advantage of this situation. You know, Trayvon Diggs is banged up. There's no Deron Bland. And so I think the Lions just blow the door off the Cowboys here. I don't think this game's going to be close at all. This is one of my top plays of the week. I locked in Detroit -3, -3, -115. So yeah.
The thing is, I actually, when I first looked at this game and I didn't do any of the other analysis, I agreed with you on Detroit because I think they are the much better football team. But the line for me is somewhat surprising given the fact that that Dallas is, I won't say they're the 8th worst team. I'd say they're at worst a middle of the pack team. Okay, maybe not as good as last year. Certainly the defensive injuries affect that. So that's why the line is a little bit surprising to me, which has me off the Lions because it looks too easy. It looks like at 3.5, there's like I say, Dallas as a home underdog against another capable team. I mean, Goff is a decent quarterback. He's nothing really special. He does have Amon St. Brown, who makes him look a lot better. They have a decent running game. Dallas is horrible running the football. I think on yards per game, certainly 82 yards per game. That's number 31. I think the Jets are worse at 80. So it's not a very big drop off between Dallas and the worst running game in the league. So fundamentally, I like the Lions, but because of this line, which again just seems high when you take a look at what it would be on a neutral and a home field for Detroit, I'm passing the game. But I suppose if I had to play the game, I would go with what I see on the field and not what I see rather than what I see in a calculator, and I would go with Detroit.
Okay. Cassandra says Guyton is a train wreck. Yeah, he's been absolutely horrible. This is such a rough matchup for them. So yeah, I love Detroit here. I think that I personally made this line Detroit -5.5. And the EPA says this line should be, I think, 4.5. So this looks a little short to me. But anyway, we'll move on to the Sunday night game. So we have the New York hosting both Sunday night and Monday night. Bengals at the Giants here.
I could understand the network choosing Jets Bills for Monday night, but why the Giants? I can understand the Bengals for Sunday night, but why against the Giants?
I don't know. I mean, especially with like no Saquon there heading into the year. Now they didn't know how great Malik Neighbors would be. However, Malik Neighbors has not practiced yet with his concussion, so looks like he's going to be out. I love backing great quarterbacks coming off a loss. Joe Burrow in his career off a loss is 16-7 against the spread. And with no Neighbors, I feel like this is an easy matchup for them.
Now, does that include the 4 losses that they've had, or the 3 prior losses they've had this year?
Yeah,
Burrow?
Includes this year. This year after the first game,
They covered against Kansas City. Yeah,
they covered against Kansas City. Then they failed to cover against Washington, so 1-1. Then they
yeah.
covered against Carolina. So
That was a win. Yeah, that was
yeah,
coming.
so
But that was a win. Yeah. So
right. So 2-1 against the spread this year.
yeah.
So coming off a loss. So it's just like when you ever have a great player coming off a bad game or defeat, they're going to
Plus
try
the
harder.
receivers are fully healthy now.
Exactly. And it feels like a great matchup against the Giants secondary that lost a lot of talent this offseason with Xavier McKinney gone. And, no neighbors there. The Giants can't exactly take advantage of Cincinnati's biggest weakness, which is the secondary. Dax Hill is injured, their top corner. So I like Cincinnati to bounce back here. I know the line is not favorable at -3.5. And I always say that you need a good reason to bet a 3.5 because that number is the least likely to hit. But I think there are two great reasons. First of all, I think the Bengals are much better than the Giants without neighbors, and second, Burrow off a loss. So I'm going to be on Cincinnati. What are your thoughts here?
Well, even with the diminished capability of the Giants offense, they still get to play a Bengals defense that once again turned a victory into defeat last week against a division rival that they needed to make up ground against because of the site of the game and also the importance of the game considering where we are in the season. I find it very difficult to back Cincinnati right here, which means I either pass or take a shot with the Giants +3.5 because by all rights, if Cincinnati's record were what it should be, they're probably laying close to a touchdown in this game. So, if you look at the intrinsic talent on the team, Cincinnati's a much better football team. Giants have probably played better than expected. And, you go back to that game when they didn't have the kicker against Washington, arguably a game that I won't say they would have won, but they certainly could have won, especially when they didn't give up any touchdowns in that game with the 7 field goals. They played very well against Dallas last week at home and forcing them to not convert into touchdowns a number of opportunities that seemed like they could. So I'm probably going to pass this game. This is probably one of the 2 or 3 games that, I'd like to play Cincinnati, kind of like I'd, like to play one of those other teams I mentioned that I just can't play because they are the better team, but they're not playing like the better team. And the Giants have to, even without neighbors, they have to feel that, hey, they're going up against a secondary that maybe some of the players who don't get a lot of playing time can have success against. So for me, it's a pass. Maybe, I can't, if I like the Giants, I'd have to think that their defense might hold Cincinnati down, and I'm not sure that I can do that. But at the same time, if I think the Giants defense or the Giants offense can have some success against this weak defense, maybe the Giants can put up 20, 24 points. I'm not sure that they can. And that's why I can't play over a total of 50.
Yeah, I will say this about Cincinnati. People will consider the Chiefs and the Ravens to be 2 of the better teams in the league. I think most people would say they're in the top 5. The Bengals, if Joe Burrow doesn't fumble late against the Chiefs, they might win that game. If they don't have the dumbest play calling ever in overtime, they might win against the Ravens, and they had that field goal opportunity. So they could easily be 3-2 with wins over the Ravens.
Yeah, but they could make another bumblehead decision against the Giants if the game is close.
Yep.
I'm beginning to my opinion of Zach Taylor is going down. My opinion of Dable has been pretty decent over the last year and a half. He hasn't had a lot to work with, and now, of course, he loses his biggest weapon. And, again, the Giants, Daniel Jones has to feel comfortable that despite the fact that their draft choice who they wanted wasn't available as far as quarterback goes, they did show confidence in him.
Yeah, that is true. And, yeah, Zach Taylor, not a big fan of him, although he is not the coach who has lost the most confidence for me over this season. That would be Mike McDaniel in
Miami.
Yeah. So I don't know what's happening with him, but
I think we're talking about coaches who may be around next year.
Yeah, I don't know.
Zach Taylor, I think, will be around.
Yeah, I agree. Unless they completely collapse, we'll see. All right, the Monday night game, we have Bills at the Jets. So this is only a Thursday injury report. It's the first day for these teams. It is noteworthy though that no James Cook, no Khalil Shakir, no Ed Oliver. Now again, the first day of practice doesn't mean all that much. So we'll see. Aaron Rodgers was limited. Josh Allen, by the way, was practicing fully. I'm still convinced he suffered a concussion at the end of that game because he smacked his head pretty hard. He was going in the blue tent, and then they had the turnover. He came back in, and then he just looked like completely lost the rest of the way. I don't know. There is a very dubious history of quarterbacks coming off concussions playing in their first game. I don't have that record in front of me, but it is very bad.
Doesn't he have to get medical clearance to come back if it was indeed a concussion?
Yeah, so if it was a concussion,
regardless of what the Bills claim it to be, I would think that the possibility that it could have been, I would think he had to have been examined or will be examined.
So he was going in the blue tent, and then he shrugged it off and came back on the field. I wonder if the Bills are hiding this because they will be in a lot of trouble if they find out it was a concussion, and they're actually listing it as a hand injury, which I don't understand. So I really think that he did suffer a concussion and they're covering it up, but I don't know. I am a conspiracy theorist, so I like the Jets a lot here. So you have the coaching change, which I love. Any coaching change, quarterback change, the team is going to play extra hard. And the Bills have a very dubious history in New York. Here they lost the last two. They're 1-3.
And you also have the change in the play calling responsibility for the Jets now.
Yeah, so
no longer Hackett.
So I didn't hear that news. Does that happen?
Yeah, who was it? Downing? What was his name? One of the other offensive assistants is going to be taking over that responsibility, and I'm not sure how well that's going to go over with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, he stripped the play calling. Yeah. Well, I think maybe Rodgers can be fickle, but given that they've lost 2 in a row here and the offense has not played well, maybe he'll understand. I suppose. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, I think there are a lot of good reasons to take the Jets. I think the Bills right now have so many injuries, and they have a very poor history playing at the Meadowlands. They lost the last 2, 1-3 against the spread in the last 4. They just never seem to play well there, and they have a ton of injuries right now. And the Jets defense is just great. They're number 2 in EPA. They kept Minnesota to 20 really, and so I think that they're the right side here. What are your thoughts on this game?
I wonder how much of a disruption the coaching change is going to cause with a relatively short time. I'm really surprised that we talked about it, I think before, maybe it was over the summer, why the Jets did not decide to take a bye after the trip to and from London, what that's going to do, the short turnaround time to adjust the body clock after the 6-hour flight back and forth. Now you've got the introduction of a new play caller, and Aaron Rodgers is somewhat stubborn at times, and I don't know how well he'll take to that, especially because he was buddy with Hackett when they came over. So I'm not that sold on the Jets. Normally I would like to, because I generally do think that teams play well for a new coach, whether it be an interim coach, although I think the players were very surprised that a change was made at this point rather than either before the season or after the season. It was a shock to Saleh, and I think that he was a player's coach to a large extent. So I wonder what that has. But the reason why I'm looking at Buffalo is, they are coming off of a couple of losses to playoff caliber teams that made the playoffs. They got that ugly loss to Baltimore 2 weeks ago, and then they had that late loss after they rallied last week down at Houston. So I think they put a little bit more of an effort into this game. And now when they're told that a Jets win puts them tied with Buffalo in the standings, I think that's a little bit more of a reason. Yeah, they have injuries, but as I tell people, we don't know about the backup sometime. But you do get to replace the player. You're not going 11 against 10. So you do get to replace the player. And sometimes these guys, we don't know how good they are until they really get an opportunity, because they know this is their opportunity. They don't know how long the starter is going to be out. And, if they don't put forth a good effort and show something on film, they'll go back to being in the guy behind. The next man up will be the guy who's behind him on the depth chart. All of this is speculative, of course. But, again, not knowing the extent of Allen tempers my enthusiasm a little bit. He's always been a gamer, and he's almost like Jim Kelly was at quarterback. He's like a linebacker in quarterback's clothing. It certainly has the size for that. There's just too much going on with the Jets that may cause them to lack a little bit of focus in preparation time, notwithstanding the advantages that they have due to the Buffalo injury. So my look in this game, not sure if I'll play it. But for example, it's stronger opinion than whatever opinion I had in the Bengals Giants game. So I'd be on Buffalo, even though I can understand the reasons to back the Jets, especially with their defensive play.
Okay, yeah, you and Evan both going against my Jets pick here. We'll see if Tom, who's my co-host on Saturday, makes it 3 for 3. But anyway, Andy, great to do the show with you. Glad we got through all the games, and I hope that everyone enjoyed the show. So, do you have any parting thoughts, or you want to promote your website here, which is thelogicalapproach.com?
Yeah, are you on it right now? Are you able to click, make a couple of clicks? Because here's what I want to show you. Go down to one of the buttons on the first button, I think, on the left-hand side, their current matchups and stats, and you click on that, and then go down to where it says college and pro football.
Okay.
Okay, click on that. And unfortunately, it's a primitive type display, but there are a lot of basic stats in there. There are also some of the stats that I use, including something called at the very far right-hand side, something I call the X factor, which I think I may have talked about in the past. It's a measure of efficiency and inefficiency, and the simple explanation is, and we'll understand the reasons why it's not the correlation, but you would normally think that a team that leads the league in yards gained would lead the league in points scored, or the league that's last in yards gained would be last in points scored. And conversely, on defense, you think the team that gives up the fewest yards would give up the fewest points. Well, that's not really the case, because you have to take into account other factors like special teams plays, where, if you score a touchdown on defense, you get 7 points, and no credit goes to the offense and the yards that they gained. So, they will have gained, say, 70 yards on a drive and scored, and then not gained 50, not get credit for gaining the 50 yards that the special teams gave them for 7 points. So, instead of dividing the 14 points instead of dividing 7 points by the 50 points the offense scored, you divide the 14 points that they scored with the contribution, and you'll see a lack of a correlation. So I look at a positive correlation, and like we take a look here at well, actually, you know what? I think you may have clicked on the wrong link. This is the end of last year. Go back a page.
Okay.
Okay. Are you back a page?
Yeah.
Okay. College and pro, and then I'm sorry. You know where it is? I'll go to subscriber. Go to the button subscribers. Go back to the home page.
Okay.
Okay. Click on. Yeah, it's on subscriber selections, where I put, things like that. But scroll down to where it says, and see where it says, yeah, click on that link.
Yeah, so it says 20.
Okay, it brings the same thing up, but it brings up this week's schedule. Oh, okay. It does?
Yeah, hold on. Let me.
Okay, I'm going to have to check that out. Maybe do a refresh.
Well, here's the.
There it is. Okay, there it is. Yeah.
So I did was I just changed the URL to 2024. So you just.
Okay. Yeah, that's where my mistake is. Thank you for I'm glad we did this, because I can go back and change that. I thought I had in the code, but in any event, you can see like both Seattle and San Francisco are -10. I look for plus numbers. New Orleans is a plus number. So is Tampa Bay. What that means is that they're scoring more points based upon their ranking relative to what they would be scoring based upon their yards gained ranking or yards allowed ranking. Usually it's a combination of the two. So I especially like underdogs when I've got a plus minus going against an underdog. But that's just some of the tools. And then I have an explanation of line power, where that's called my perception and reality, where the line power takes into account what the point spread was and what the actual result versus the line was. The perception, I think, counts for 1/3, and the reality counts for 2/3 of the weight and things like that. So that might be the one thing that I could point to people if they want to take a look on a regular basis. In fact, I'm going to try and redo the current stats. Should be redone to be able to call that page up directly from the current stats.
Houston -26 X factor. Just noticed that they're 4-1 straight up, and 1-4 against the spread.
Yeah, and the numbers that. Since let me go back and call that up here. Okay, and again, I use yards gained. Houston is number 6, averaging 377 yards per game, but they're only 19th in points scored, 20.4 yards per game. That's related to turnovers, which aren't that bad, but also some special teams and field position games, settling for field goals rather than touchdowns when they've gained 70 yards on a drive. Defensively, they're number 4. They allow 274 yards per game, but they allow 22.8 points per game, which is number 17. So you take the 6 and the 19, that's a minus 13. The 4 and the 17, that's minus 13. Is that minus 26? Is that the number we're looking at?
Yep. Exactly.
That's basically, again, and that's a perfect example. And that's where, again, you're 4-1 straight up. You're 1-4 against the points, meaning that you're not doing what theoretically you would be expected to do based upon your ability to move the football or prevent moving of the football, but your inability to cash those statistical edges into the one stat that matters. Well, the one stat that matters are wins and losses, but the one stat that matters on what you're doing on the football field are the points that you accumulate, regardless of how you accumulate them.
Yeah. All this is fascinating. Guys, make sure you check out thelogicalapproach.com for all these stats. Is great stuff.
And I will fix that link up within minutes after we disconnect.
Okay. Sounds good.
So Andy, go to the stats section.
Andy, thanks once again for coming on. I love doing the show with you on Thursday. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching and commenting. Just really appreciate it. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. I will be back on Saturday with Tom to do our final thoughts here for the week 6 picks. And then next week, full slate. No reason to not have any show on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Saturday. So looking forward to that. Kenny, I assume we'll be back just from enduring the hurricane. So we get to hear from him. So Andy, thanks so much for joining me once again. And guys, I will talk to you later. Have a great start to your weekend. I'll talk to you on Saturday.